Well, it's so great to be a part of this new series, Parenting in the 21st Century. And I believe it will be a real help and blessing to each of us personally, as well as to our marriages and families. So, a key statement I'd like to start with is so important to understand. Ideal can seem out of reach, and it sometimes feels easier to put it out of sight. Part of being a parent is to point our children toward the ideal while at the same time navigating what is real. And that's what we want to think about today. How do we picture and press and encourage the ideal and yet deal with very real people who are broken in a broken world? Well, a parent's greatest desire is to raise a child who can face anything with wisdom and confidence. But in this world of overextended schedules and all kinds of amoral messages and incessant peer pressure, how can we raise a confident child that follows God's will and not the will and the practice and the pattern of the world? Well, I believe it's very possible to raise whole children in a broken world. Have you ever heard the quote that Mother Teresa made? She said, "If you want to change the world, go home and love your family." And that's one of my favorite quotes, and it's so true. Changing the world happens within the walls of our homes. You see, when we raise our kids to be good people and then send them out into the world, that's when things change. And even though the world right now, it seems so dysfunctional and a lot worrisome, we can do our part to make sure our kids are raised well. That's our job. I may not be able to solve all the problems of the world, but I sure have the responsibility of setting the right examples for and teaching correctly my own children and grandchildren and anyone that I have the influence in their lives. So here are some suggestions of how to do it. Number one, lean in. Those are my two favorite words when it comes to parenting. Because you see, leaning in means that no matter what, we are there for our kids. In their bad times, in their good times, in their crazy times, we lean in and we give it all we've got. I mean, even when our child is on the floor at Walmart crying because we aren't buying a toy that he or she wants, we lean in. We must not dismiss our kids and their feelings because they are real. And they aren't meant to bother us because our kids need us to lean in and teach them how to cope and how to be kind, even when in their little immature minds it's very tough. It doesn't mean we yield to every desire of our children, but we always let them know that we are there and we care. And that leads us to the second point, which is be present. And you're probably sick of hearing that piece of advice, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway. And you say, well, why are you doing that, Tom? Because it's completely valid. We've got to be present with our family. And in this day and age, there's just tons of things that seem to take us away from any kind of real, genuine presence with our mates or our families or even our extended families. I mean, the other night at dinner, I walked by several tables of families that were eating their meals. And just out of curiosity, I looked around to see how many tablets the kids had and iPhones and Samsung phones the people had. And to be honest, I wasn't surprised when I saw about half or more of the tables with screens on them, and every family member sitting in their own little world, looking at their own little screens and not being present with each other. Now, I'm not casting blame, and I'm trying not to judge. Trust me, I've given my children and my grandchildren the phone in the grocery store when I just needed more time to do what I wanted to do. when they were about ready to knock each other out of the cart. But when screens replace family time, families are disconnected and relationships become strained. So, in order to foster a parent-child bond, both parties have to be present. We have to allow time for conversations. We have to show our kids what it's like to talk about things that matter, to confide in each other about what happened during the day. That's all important. No matter how small or big it may seem, it's all important to lean in and to be present. But then, third, we must parent like we were meant to, no matter what. I kind of feel like we're reaching a time in our culture when anything goes is going, and it's kind of happening real fast. Parents are feeling weary and pressured to allow their kids to do things because, hey, let's face it, everyone else is letting their kid do something. Or because they just don't have the time to parent the way we were meant to. It's like a sad version of Keeping Up with the Joneses, and it hurts our kids. Parenting is the toughest role I ever had. But Judy and I couldn't quit because we realized we only had 18 years to try to get it right. And my prayer is that the values and the morals that we tried to model and instill in our children will continue to hold steady in their lives now, and will have great benefit for our lives down the road. You see, remember, parenting was created to be a marathon, not a sprint. And we have to see our kids through that marathon. Now, before we go any further, let's discuss these important questions. So, if we're going to raise children who know how to change the world for good, we got to remember the first three things we've learned. Lean in, be present, and parent like we were meant to, no matter what. Now, the fourth thing is to model kindness and to give grace. I believe these two things are so important in the parenting process. I mean, who better to send into this broken world than a kind-hearted human who is gracious to everyone they meet? Our kids need to see us modeling kindness, lending a helping hand to those who need it, volunteering for charities in the community, and being kind to others, even when they don't deserve it. They need to see us being gracious to everyone around us, even the person who just cut us off in traffic. And I'm not speaking from experience or anything. You know that, of course. We got to show our kids what it is like to give someone the benefit of the doubt. Because, man, I need that so often. You need that so often. And our kids need that so often. It's part of developing kindness and grace. Now, these are just a few examples of kindness and grace, but you get the point. Kids pick up on kindness, and they'll imitate exactly what we are showing them. I mean, even how we talk to our pets, even how we treat our pets will trickle down the line. We don't have to force kindness on our kids, though. I don't believe that forcing manners or kindness really teaches anything. But our actions will speak loudly enough, and our kids, hopefully, will follow suit in due time. Maybe not in their teenage years, but in due time. Well, the fifth thing is this. Raise our kids to be the doers and the helpers. One thing my mom, especially, but my dad also taught me, was to be a doer and a helper. And now as a parent and a grandparent, I see the value of teaching my children and grandchildren to do the same. I want them to be doers and helpers because our human tendency is to be selfish, think about ourselves, do only what we want and need. But I mean, when there is trash on the sidewalk that 100 people have passed by, I want my kids to be the ones who see it, pick it up, and throw it away. When we model how to be doers and helpers, our kids follow in our footsteps. And they will eventually be the doers and the helpers who change the world with their virtues and their ethics. Well, some final thoughts on raising whole kids in a broken world. I hear a lot of people say that our world really hasn't changed that much. But I'm going to tell you, the social media perpetuates the problems, and the whole value structure of our nation has been affecting all of us. And so I think for the most part, we are living in a different time than back when I was being raised. So it's a time that we need to take a step back and make sure that our kids are raised to be loving and kind and giving. It's our job. It's our charge. And it's what our kids deserve. And ultimately, it's what our world needs. But most importantly, it's what we as parents and grandparents, future parents, and people who influence others, it's what we were meant to do.